That doesn't look bad. Sorry for the delay. YouTube was locking kicking quality. Okay, so to get started, so DeepRacer Local was developed several years ago in order to get around the cost of AWS DeepRacer. So I'm going to go ahead and show how to get it set up, and this will be a complete setup. So this is a fresh install of Ubuntu 20.0.4, and I will go ahead and get started. I may end up answering some of the AMA questions throughout this because just the nature of what I'm doing. So first, there's several packages I need to install just to get started. So I need build essentials, and this is so I can install the drivers, because there's several ways to install the video drivers, but I prefer this method, and I will explain as I'm setting it up why. I'm going to need curl, I'm going to need git, and docker c. And I never can remember if it's build essential or build essentials. And I'm misspelling something. Figures. Oh, that's what I'm doing. I didn't type in install. Yeah, okay. I know why that's happening. There's a couple of extra things I need to do. Install docker c. See, as many times as I do this, I still don't get it right the first time. All right, so I at least have build essentials now. So I need to go to NVIDIA's website because I have a GPU on this. Drivers. And I'm going to need Tesla Data Center series. I need the K series, Tesla K80, and we need the Linux 64-bit. So I've done some pre-setup on this computer already. Obviously, I did the installation, but with like a K series, you need to make sure that you have resizable bar. So that's a BIOS setting. Some computers do not have resizable bar. You also need resizable bar for the 30 series. So if you're using a 30 series GPU and you have old hardware, you might not be able to do that. So this is running a K80 with a 1080 50K in it, about 16 gigs of RAM, because you don't need a whole lot of RAM if you have a GPU to do the workload. If you don't have a GPU to do the workload, a lot of cores, a lot of memory. That's what you're going to need. So now I need to run this. Also sudo chmod x to make it executable. And so the reason I do my drivers installs this way is this run file actually gives you a lot more output of what potentially is wrong. So we had one guy that had bought a K80 and I didn't realize it needed resizable bar. And I told them, well, download the drivers and run them. And the error it gave him basically pointed to the fact resizable bar. So to do DeepRacer local, you don't need a whole lot of hardware. And I forgot to run that as sudo. My original rig was just an Acer Nitro G50, I believe it was, with a 1060 in it, 6 gigs of RAM on the video card. I didn't go out and spend a whole lot, and it works fine. There's some limitations on it. Like I would have to decrease the number of episodes I could train. I would have to decrease the batch size. Because if you have that too high, then your memory fills up and everything just crashes. So this will take a minute to build and install everything we need for the GPU. And I'll just hit yes, hit OK. So that's complete. So if I do NVIDIA SMI, I should get the output. Yeah, so there, it's seeing the GPU. If NVIDIA SMI doesn't work, and this is the other reason I run those drivers. By default, Ubuntu loads with a set of generic drivers, and that will actually stop NVIDIA's drivers from loading. And if you do this generally through installing the drivers through apt, it doesn't remove that blacklist that you need in order to make sure the Navarro drivers aren't loading. And by running that script, it does everything and makes the blacklist for you. So at this point, I should be able to pull down DeepRacer for Cloud. And so here it is, the community repo. And I'm running this on local hardware, but this is designed that it can run in almost any of the cloud environments: Azure, Google, AWS. So some people that don't have dedicated hardware will run this up in the cloud. They'll do like spot instances, the cheapest type of instance that they can get, and they'll do their training that way. So, so I'm going to clone the repo, and I need to step away for like 2 seconds because I'm contracted here. And sorry about that. So let's get back to this. So the repo is pulled down. And so we want to cd into it, ls, cd, and bin, so ls. So here's a bunch of scripts, and let me pull up the page. So here, Lars has put together a bunch of, no, I have to go AFK for a second. I have a contractor here working on the house, and you need to talk to me real quick. So here's all the instructions that we have put together. So like somebody asked like if it can work on Windows. Here's the Windows install instructions. And you need to follow this. About a year ago, this wasn't available on Windows, and then Windows finally enabled GPU pass-through. So you need to do this, then you can just follow the rest of these instructions. So initial installation, and so what we need to do is run this prepare script. And if you read this, it tells you for local installs, it's not recommended to run this. Well, that's true and not true. So what it's really saying is if this isn't a new setup, you probably don't want to run this. If it's a new setup, then you're safe to run it because all it does is install a bunch of stuff and you change some settings. So I'm going to run the prepare sh, and it's going to go through and do its thing, install a bunch of stuff. And it should install Docker CD for me. So I'm just looking over some of these AMA questions because, so one here is, does DeepRacer locally, it won't cost us money? It reduces the cost because you're still going to get like, you're going to still need to upload the files to AWS, and anything ingested into AWS usually costs some money. The storage that you're going to use for S3 for the thing is going to cost a little bit of money. We're running. So there's always going to be a little cost. I think I end up spending roughly maybe $3 to $4 a month when I do it locally versus if I was actually to do it in the cloud. So now I need to make sure if Docker run hello world can run without sudo. So that error tells me I cannot run this without sudo, and we need to make sure that happens. So actually, I'll pull it up here so you guys can see these instructions. Run Docker without sudo. So these are the instructions I need right here. And it might say some of these are already existing because that script usually does create them. Which is what I expect. So that command ran. So we're going to do this to activate it. And Docker run hello world. There, so that tells me that Docker can now run appropriately, the way we need to. So we will head back to these instructions, and it says now, I actually, if you're running 16 gigs without a GPU, I would say you probably want like 32, because at that point, everything's stored in memory, and that includes the Redis that's used for SageMaker. And so Redis is where some of the experience is held while you're training, and that will grow as it trains. You can get around that by increasing slot file, but if you do that, then unless you're using something like a NVMe, you're going to see it really slow. All right, so now I should be able to run the init file. I'm just going to download some images. Yeah, the hard drive size doesn't need to be that big. I mean, yeah, you're going to collect files for the models, but if you're training the same one over and over again, then it's not quite needed to be that big. Why do I see red there? My question is, did I remember to run curl? Need to check that real quick. Yeah, okay, I did install it. Because curl is needed for some of these scripts. And if you don't have it installed, then the script fails, but it looks like it ran, and you'll move on to the next step, and it will actually not work. So at this point, it's pulling down the community images, and to show you those, Docker so all the images that we have are stored up here in Docker Hub. The one that you really need to update every time that there's a new map is DeepRacer RoboMaker. So all the new maps get loaded up in here, and like this is the version as the latest map. And there's different versions here. So there's a GPU version, so you can actually offload some of the resources to the GPU if you have one. I'll go touch on SageMaker images real quick. So there's several images here, and you can see like some of these sizes are really big and some of them are not so. So obviously the ones that say CPU are if your CPU, the GPU ones are GPUs, and the GPU NV, only use NV if you're running a 30 series. If you're not running a 30 series, do not use NV. There's a known bug with Compute 9, which is what is used in these images, and this more closely matches with what AWS has. And the 30 series basically hits that bug every single time, and so this is a slightly different version in order to be able to run 30 series. And so we're at a point of waiting for downloads. So somebody was here asked if they could participate from the region they live in. and can there be a group from their region? I mean, anyone can start an AWS community like we have, because we're not part of AWS. We're an independent community of individuals that came together. As Thomas said, I started AWS DeepRacer back in 2019 when I was an actually Udacity scholar student. So I had gone through a slightly different course than you guys have right now, because back then there was only DeepRacer. They didn't have Decomposer, and they kind of glossed over DeepLens. They didn't bother with it. It was all focused on DeepRacer. Because at the time, I think they really, really wanted to push DeepRacer, which, you know, it's something I fell in love with and just continue to do. My background is actually as a system engineer, so I'm not a programmer or software engineer by any means. Most of my time spent with servers and network switches. So that is done, and I should be able to now do source, activate SH, but I forgot one important step before I do that, because I need to configure Minio. There's one step I'm going to skip in this, which is actually setting up the AIM roles and everything like that. I mean, that you can do that with admin access and just get the tokens and set up your default profile with AWS CLI. But I do need to configure the Minio profile, which is this command right here. And so our access key is going to be what the default is for Minio. So it's Minio admin, I believe it is, and Minio admin. Defaults can be taken, and now I should be able to run activate. So that says the Minio service is created. So if I do Docker PS, I do not see Minio. And I forgot to do something. I need a reboot. Yeah, that's okay. Just didn't tell me to do something. And so let me sudo reboot. There's so many steps, and I always forget them because you only do this a few times. Okay, so we're back up. Let me get to this. I might need to run that bin in it again, because it should have told me. Bin. Let's just go back in this folder. Just want to make sure that runs smoothly. So I saw permission denied there. Okay, that's fine. That already exists. So source. There we go. That's what I should have seen. So every time you run source, this is gonna load. We'll make Minnow start. Minnow's a pseudo version of S3, and then it should load DeepRacer commands. And so like dr start training, and I expect this kind of to fail on the first go around, and that's going to be because it needs to download all these images. Huh. So that's the error that somebody else was trying to set this up and got. That's interesting. I might look at what images are loaded. So I'm just changing the permissions on. Is it? Oh wait, it's -R, right? Not plus. I'm just changing the permissions on DeepRacer real quick, and we will try this again, because that is an interesting error that it was getting. So we're getting a vote of 3 error. Oh, I know why we're getting this. So so after you get everything set up, before you hit start, you need to do this command. This command generates the bucket that's going to be needed in S3 that will contain like your reward function, your hyperparameters, all that. There's a default settings already there, and now that we have this, I should be able to do this. Stop. So this is what kind of happens sometimes when you don't already have the image. So if I come here, and I'm going to come to the environment variables. So the flexibility of this, so you have all the features that you would have up on console. The only thing is you don't have the fancy interface. But I also think it gives you a little more flexibility, because you can have a custom action space. You can, try slightly different Python packages as long as they are available in the Docker image. And so don't go in, like, if you don't think about installing one and then into the Docker image, building your own Docker image and that, because then when you go put it up in the console, well, they're not going to have the library package and it's going to fail. So we have that. So that's the image we have. And let me go to Docker Hub, and I'm just going to make sure it is here on this computer. It's copied. Next. So we do have it. Docker PS, I should only see, yep. And your start training. So all these commands that I'm running, all the configurations, everything, is in this GitHub document that Lars made. Like I would take your time and familiarize yourself with this page, references, which explain all the variables and all the commands and what they can do. So this is now starting. Just because that failed start, I need to stop and start it. There's some settings we want to change almost right away, but I'm not worried about that right this second. But so if I go to data, I go to Minio, bucket, custom files. So here's like the reward function. Here's your meta and hyperparameters. And if I edit this one, so these two here, they're too low. Change them. Like, and it doesn't matter what number you put in there. I would just crank it up. These are termination conditions for the instance, and you can hit these like max number of episodes before it starts. You can hit it really easy. And so people will come back. And so here it is training. So there's a couple ways to view this, but the quick and dirty way is actually just going to localhost 8080. And if I go to main camera, one of these doesn't work, and I can't remember if it's the main camera or if it's the, might be the main camera that's not working. Yeah, okay. So there, the car's moving, training's working, we know it works. So now, so there's other tools that we have in the community repo as well, and there's some questions about this. Back here. So analysis, DeepRacer analysis. These are tools to analyze all the logs. Now there's a command, I don't like using it, which is dr log analysis, that will actually execute the logs. But there's a bunch of changes you have to make just to get it to work, and I don't want the extra overhead. So what I usually do is pull this down by itself. Now I'll put it in the, trying to decide where I want to put it. No, I'll put it by itself, it's fine. So one of the questions was, can you do localmate training on a Mac? I know there was a group of individuals that got it running a long time ago, and I don't know if Joachim, if you know, was that ever documented on the wiki page? There is certain platforms, of course, that this will not run on, and that would be ARM processors. So big fancy M1 books from Apple will not run this because there is a binary file that was compiled for x86. So if you try to run it on an M1 processor, that file is not going to operate, and you're going to get basically, I think it'll say communication problems because it's a file used for all the communication between all the different parts. So DeepRacer analysis is there. So I need a couple of other Python packages. I'm going to do virtual and to make it, need to install I thought it was Python pip, but I don't think it matters. It's like a pip here, right? Yeah. 3 install. Yeah, so I'm just talking back and forth with Joachim here. So on the wiki, there's some outdated instructions for the Mac, and maybe one of you guys that is interested in running it on a Mac can look at that and maybe figure out the steps that are missing and get it cleaned up, and then then it will be supported running on the Mac as well. So install. Is it Jupyter or is it Jupyter Notebook? I can never remember. Okay, it's just Notebook, right? So that's installing Jupyter Notebook, which we use for the DeepRacer log analysis, and you guys should be familiar with that by now with the Udacity course. Sure. Yeah. So okay. I didn't solve that, but okay. Source, DMV, bin, and activate. So this now made a little environment for me to run everything in. And so you now want to install the requirements. Oh, and log analysis will only work with Python 3. So that's one reason why I'm using Ubuntu 20.0.4. It's Python 3 out of the box. If you use the older one, the 18.04, that is Python 2. And then I need DeepRacer utils. Okay, so I think we're good there. So Jupyter Notebook, I will go into the training analysis, and we need a bunch. So DeepRacer utils, the commands here, you just uncomment that and run that. I always just do it manually. And that ran fine. So then there's sample logs. This will load and run, so you can kind of see what it's doing. But that's no fun. Let's do the actual DeepRacer logs. And actually, let's not do it this way, because I want to be as lazy as possible. So observe cloud data. Bucket and cd rl DeepRacer. And I'm going to do the D. That'll get me the working directory. And like I said, there's different ways to set this up. This is just my preferred method. But this is the files, the main log I care about. Because it will contain the model data for what's going on right now. And you can ignore that. That's just because I'm loading this differently. So I will just leave this on the defaults because I think the default is this track. So you can change the track here. So these are the track names that are available in here. The other reason I load it this way, because then you have to wait for the image to get updated. Whereas if I have access to the NumPy file, I can just drop the NumPy file in and have it available. And so bunch of charts here, different things, like you can see the iteration times. You can see its progress. So you can see here it's steadily gaining progress, and as progress is increasing, time's increasing. I must have missed the field. I'm just going to run this all so it's all up to date. Restart and run all cells. So that's log analysis set up. Let's look at some more of the questions people asked. So there was quite a few of them. As that trains, and then I can show you log analysis a little more. So do you need a GPU enabled device? No, you don't. You just need cores. I mean, the more core, it's going to go slower on a CPU based system, but it's possible to completely train on a CPU, especially if you just want to save money. What are the training advantages of DeepRacer locally? Well, one, you save money. That's probably the number one. The second one is you have a little more flexibility in what you do, because obviously on council now they changed some of it just this month. It was a pain to actually customize the file. You can now customize your action space a bit better, but they have a limit on 30 different action spaces. Now, generally, the more action spaces, the longer it's going to take to train. There's some of us that do as little as 7. So, So somebody asked, how do I set up local training? Well, I just went through it. Is it possible on Google Colab? There was a notebook for a while that was a SageMaker Grid notebook that would let you run DeepRacer, but I don't think it's been updated since the council was changed about 2 years ago. And even then, that's still going to cost you money to sit there and run it. Honestly, you're better off basically firing up a EC2 instance, like a spot instance, where it's going to be cheaper and cost reducive, and just run it that way. Does DeepRacer help with physical? Since we do, so somebody's asking, since you don't need the physical car for the virtual live, what is the interaction it does with DeepRacer with the physical cars? So the idea of the virtual is, so you're training for the physical cars. So the model that you're building is actually a package that will get loaded on the physical car. And so when you go, usually at the AWS events, they've been doing them virtually. Prior to COVID, they actually held summits around different areas in the globe, and they would actually do these live, that you would take your model there, load it into a vehicle, and actually race it around a physical track. So somebody's asking here about the relationship concept between when one knows to explore and when one's to exploit. Well, with reinforcement learning, you're not controlling the explore and exploit. I mean, there's hyperparameters you can adjust, like the entropy, to tell it, hey, you have this level of uncertainty, and spend your time exploring the action space more. But the car is going to get to a point where it's decided, hey, I'm no longer exploring the track, I'm now exploiting, and this is called convergence. So then the car just starts following almost the same behavior over and over again, chasing the reward function. Somebody asked, what's the lightest virtual model available? I'm assuming when they mean lightest, I'm assuming they mean weight. So, and if they're referring to the skins don't matter. What's going to matter is going to be the sensors you put onto it. Like I have here, this is the just the original DeepRacer, and the only sensor that has on it is this single camera in the front right here. And so then when you get to the Evo has more sensors. So it has a LiDAR module that goes on top, so that's extra weight. And then it has another camera module, that's going to be extra weight. So it's all about what sensors you configure on your DeepRacer. So somebody asked about, can this be installed on EC2? Yes, it can be. Is there a way to reduce training costs? Well, that's what DeepRacer Local is all about. It's about reducing the training costs. So whether you do that in EC2, an Azure instance, or even one of the Google instances, what are the max action spaces? Really, there isn't any limit. There is limits on the angle. 30 is the biggest you can go. The smallest you can go, -30. Speed, there really isn't a limit, but I mean, eventually it is going to top out. On console, you can't go above 4. And then the hyperparameters, they're asking for the limits on those. So the best place to get the limits on those, because I don't know them off the top of my head, is to actually the AWS documentation, because they are listed under tuning hyperparameters, I believe it is. So somebody also asked, how do you keep yourself motivated when you get an error in your code? How do you know if it's the right way to do things or not? So for me, I'm not a programmer. So coding is not my strong suit, but when I get errors, I tend to step away. Taking a break sometimes just helps a lot. And then come back and tackle the problem. Sometimes I've sat down in front of code I've written and realized, what was I thinking? Because you after taking a second glance at it, you realize exactly where the error was, and it was you. Like flipping logic's a common thing I've seen, and that's with other racers here that say, "Hey, I'm having problems with my reward function. Can you look at it?" And they have the logic flip where like they want something to be true, but they put not in front of it, so then that automatically makes it false. Somebody asked to walk through logs. I just loaded up logs. We'll look at it here in just a few minutes. Hey, Joachim, how are we doing on time? Because I know we started a bit late. And so somebody asked, what happens when DeepRacer starts up? Because it takes 6 to 10 minutes to initiate. So there's quite a bit going on here. So the original platform, and I will log into my account so you guys are coming in as they made a major architecture change to DeepRacer. So before, it used to be it would launch a stack and using CloudFormation within your own AWS instance. And they made a change to try to simplify the pricing for everyone, that it now launches on their private servers. But I'm positive they still follow the same methodology, because it's the same methodology that we're using to set these up. Yeah, I think probably another 12 minutes, and then I'll just wrap it up. Because a lot of these AMA questions I kind of touched on. So what it was doing is it was deploying a bunch of resources into AWS, and they still do this, but it's just different way. So they're setting up buckets for you. They are setting up subnets, ACLs, and obviously VPCs, an internet gateway to handle the traffic back and forth. And then, of course, they're setting up RoboMaker, and they are setting up SageMaker. So going through this deployment process for CloudFormation does take a little bit of time, because it's going through and making sure each step completes before it goes to the next step. So are there any good guides getting started locally? Like I said, go to the GitHub repo for DeepRacer for Cloud. Go to the Git IO docs page and follow the initialization instructions. There is initialization instructions there separately for Windows subsystem for Linux, because there is extra stuff you need to do in order to get that enabled properly. Can you tell me how it was with your Udacity scholarship program, especially for the machine learning part? It was pretty challenging. So if you guys get picked for the machine learning scholarship, the full scholarship, make sure you leave plenty of time at the end. Don't think you have all this time to do it, because you have a capstone project to do at the very end. So you've got a paper to write, then you've got an ML model to train and present. So you want to make sure you've given yourself plenty of time at the end of that to do that capstone project. So minimum hardware requirements, I touched base on this. You don't need a whole lot to get started. Like I said, I used to run on a 1060, which only has 6 gigs. It's possible, but it will limit your ability to crank up the hyper parameters because you'll need to keep batch size low and the number of episodes. But you can still train successful models. I mean, I've been easily up in the top 10 sometimes. So somebody was asking about custom action spaces, and AWS just changed this. So what I'm going to do is change a browser source because I'm logged into my AWS account. And I will actually show the new method of doing this. And then after that, because I think that's about all most of the questions, I will go back to log analysis. And guys can see the log, what it's doing. So you're going to lose a screen for a second as I add in a browser source. Actually, I'll just do a screen capture. Okay, so here's the stack that used to get launched all the time. And let's go into AWS DeepRacer. So now, recent update, they have added a bit better action space. So PPO, time trial, discrete action space. So you still have the granular controls here. So like you can do 3, you can go 3 here. But now to actually change these on console, I can now do advanced configuration. And now you have almost the same ability as I do on local. The only difference is you see right here, it says any new action will be added to the values, and you can add up to 15 more actions. So there is a limit of 30. So if I keep adding, once I get to 29, it will stop letting me add. And so you can customize this. And it is 30 because it starts at 0. But that's how you do it in console now. It used to be that I would have to come in to here. I would have to come and copy to this to S3, download the file, edit the file, upload the file, then come back here and then do an import, and then import that custom file with that custom, and then you could actually train with it on console. So they've helped you out a bit. They've made it easier. Let's turn that off, and we will turn this back on. So let's look at log analysis real quick, and then we'll wrap it up. So let's run it fully then. So the progress is probably about 70 right now. You can see here, progress on the side, time, and because I didn't change any default settings, it's a bit slow. Yeah, so it's reached 75, and we can see time if completed, it's current, the reward it's got, and then this is an estimated reward that log analysis gives you. So the idea behind this is you need to be analyzing your reward function, for example, and you want to make sure that you're seeing the behavior that you want. So what I mean is, if I want the car to go fast, then the reward with the lowest time needs to have the highest reward. And if it doesn't, then you need to look back at your reward function and how you're doing it. You shouldn't try and tell the car how to drive, but reward the behavior that you want. So when I mean not try to tell the car how to drive, I mean like telling it, hey, take a 30 turn degree here. You know, let it, it'll find its own path. So then, like, you'll start seeing things like the 5 biggest rewards for completed laps. Once it starts completing laps, it probably will take a little while longer for it to complete laps. You'll see the 5 fastest. So these are going to be this is going to be the key for you, for especially when you're trying to analyze what's going on. Like I said, make sure that the lowest time has the highest reward. If it doesn't, then your car is going to do it. Like, for example, if you give it a reward for speed, eventually the car will actually figure out that, hey, if I go slow enough, I'll actually collect more reward if you've written it poorly. And so then the car will actually start driving slow. There's a lot in here. I'm not going to go through it all, but the default track must be something else, because let me check something. So that's not in the line. Not that file. This file. Reevent 2019. Okay, and I think this is 2018 by default. Yeah, it's reinvent base. So and you know, you don't have to change this track, only if you want to see those nice little visuals. You can still get the data out of the log analysis. Having the wrong track doesn't hurt anything, because you can still see what the reward's doing. That should be the right track. I think the only thing that'll change is going to be that track length attribute that is on those functions. Yeah, that's better. So now you kind of see what the car is doing around the track and how it's behaving, and this is flexible because you have control over these values of what you're looking at. And then so here's a heat map, and you can see like where it's collecting rewards and where it's not collecting rewards. I think the default is the center line function. I think, let's look at that. Yeah, so it's just the default center line function that they provide. So it's going to get, if it follows the center line, it's going to get a more reward. Is there any other questions from the chat? Because I've pretty much touched base on the AMA questions. I didn't read them out verbatim. So I'm just gonna go back over here. This terminal, pull up history, and so just a quick review. So I installed build essentials curls and Git. Did not do Docker CE because that requires that PGP code. Downloaded the drivers for the GPU, installed the GPU, clone the repo, run the prepare script, and then I should have rebooted after that. We want to then make sure Docker is running as without sudo. So we run these commands to make sure it runs as sudo. We need to do sudo init to sh to run the rest of the setup. Then I should have ran AWS config profile minnow. And then we should have done source activate.sh. And once we did that, we needed to do dr upload custom files to generate the bucket, and then we were able to start. Those are the steps. I mean, it's not hard. And like I said, here in the community repo, DeepRacer for cloud, and right here's the GitHub pages. And then we also have DeepRacer wiki. So DeepRacer wiki has a bunch of knowledge. Some of it's outdated, some of it's not, because we went through an initial council change and then went through another one, and I believe. But one of the good documents is this one here, which lays out how to customize the sensors and everything like that for DeepRacer, how to change the different time trial modes, object avoidance or head-to-head. And the only thing that this doesn't cover is there's now a version at the end of these. So we're on version 4 right now. The original one was version 1. So if it has no version, it automatically assumes it's version 1, and you won't want that. Like I said, some of this is outdated, but at least for this page, those configurations are actually pretty decent. We need to update this, but it's changing so much it's been hard to keep up with. You might see, if you Google local, so before I wrap this up, you might see some other repos that are out there. Don't use them, they're outdated. DeepRacer Cloud is the only one that's up to date at this point. So, all right. Thanks for coming. If there's any questions, you can reach out to me on Slack. My name there is Daniel Morgan. I go by the racer name Jarrett. So thanks for coming.